Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we're going to be comparing the all-new Nissan Z to the Toyota Supra. Now, since the driving impressions on the Z are no longer embargoed, this comparison is going to be a little bit more in-depth. I'm going to be talking about how both of the cars drive in today's video, and at the end of the video, the goal is to help you guys decide whether you should go for the Supra, especially since they now have a manual transmission with the Supra, or if you should go to the new Nissan Z. Now, before we get into the comparison, as always, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. Let's get into the comparison. Starting under the hood of the Z, we have a twin-turbo 3-liter V6 that goes through either a 9-speed automatic or a 6-speed manual. It's good for 400 horsepower and then 350 pound-feet of torque. And definitely a cool engine. We'll kind of talk about the power of this engine a little bit later in the video, and then also just kind of how that obviously compares to the Supra's engine from a feel perspective with the driving dynamics. But cool display overall with what Nissan has set up. Now, popping over to the Supra, we have a 3-liter inline 6 turbocharged as well. Goes through an 8-speed automatic transmission or now a 6-speed manual. It's good for 382 horsepower and then 368 pound-feet of torque. So the Supra is technically down in horsepower compared to the Z, and then down on, or sorry, up on torque, at least on paper compared to the Z. Now, popping back over to the Z, you guys can see from a design perspective, they've kind of stuck with the retro styling here at the Z. You can see there with that little Y shape there. It looks like a wine glass, actually, funny enough, on the hood. And then look at the daytime running lights with the headlights again. Just like the overall shape of them just leads to that kind of like retro feel of the car. And then you got the new Nissan logo with the white print there on the front end. And then you guys can see here with the grille, kind of the aesthetic there. And notice there's not a lot of like fake venting or anything like that. It's just a pretty clean look overall with the car. And so it definitely lends, again, like I said, to that more retro look, but just to kind of like a cleaner, sleeker design. And I think this is a design that more people are going to, you know, just become accustomed to, because it already feels, you know, like it's something we've seen before, but on top of that, it's not a lot happening, right? Now, popping over the Supra, it's like the exact opposite. And sorry about the trees and everything in this video. But you guys can see here, we've got lots of venting that is not real. You got the really cool daytime running lights with the headlights. Definitely love the design on that. I think that looks super sleek. And again, more venting next to it. And you can see most of it's, you know, closed off, which is kind of humorous. Obviously, you know, Toyota originally said that, oh, we're going to leave aftermarket companies to do that. And it's like, oh, whatever. But yeah, definitely a lot busier from a design perspective. It looks more futuristic, but definitely a lot busier. Now, going over the tire and wheel setup here with the Z, this actually has lightweight forged wheels, which, right, is going to help out with your weight at all 4 corners. And notice that since this is the performance, it's got larger brakes, right? So that's a big part of the performance package, is actually getting larger brakes with the car, which is going to benefit track driving, and then obviously actually driving on road as well, so you can push it to the limit just a little bit more. And something else to mention is, again, look here at the side skirt again, just super simplistic. There's not a lot going on. There's just like that one prominent body line pretty much there on the side. You can see the hips too, which look really cool. But yeah, they've just kept it clean, right? It's just super simple. You got the hips in the back, you got the one body line, and then yeah, you do have the two-tone roof, which is really cool in my opinion. Definitely makes the car look a lot better. I've seen Zs without the two-tone design, and I'm not a huge fan. Now popping over to the Supra, we have just normal wheel setup, but then we also have performance brakes with the Supra. I've never actually reviewed a 2.0 Supra, so I don't know if the brakes on that are smaller. I'm assuming they are, but again, I've never reviewed one. I'd never look up stuff like that unless I review a car, frankly. But you can see here with the mirrors, I like how the mirrors are different finish than the rest of the paint. And again, tons of body lines, tons of curves. Like, it still has a curvy back end just like the Z, and then you got more thick venting, and there's just a lot happening here with the car. And so again, it's just very busy. Now popping back over to the Nissan, you got a regular Nissan key fob here, and this is pretty cool. So you've got the hatch. I like how you have to press a button below the Nissan logo to like open it up. I don't know, it just feels like you're doing something cool. Now here's the thing about the storage space here in the back is it's got a pretty high loading floor. So you like it's deep for like the size of car this is. It's actually pretty decent in terms of like the length and the width, but in terms of like the depth, it's not that solid. So just definitely take that into account. It reminds me of like Corvette, right? Kind of reminds me, not the new C8, but like C7, C6. It kind of reminds me of the storage space there. And you can see the subwoofer for the Bose sound system. But I mean, for what it is, it's, it's practical. It's just high loading floor. Now, going over the rest of the rear, again, you've got that modern retro styling, which I think just absolutely works. You've got the spoiler that comes with the performance package. Again, without that spoiler, it looks kind of funny. So you can see there with the taillights, and then notice the Z logo, got the Nissan logo right next to it, and then some parking sensors here on the rear. And I love the styling of the exhaust tips as well. And you guys heard the exhaust clips at the beginning of the video, so let me know which one you like the sound of better. And overall, again, I think they did a great job with the rear styling of this car, and just with the overall styling. It's just a very clean, sleek design throughout, which is great. Now popping back over to the Supra, the busy mobile, you guys can see here quite a bit happening. So notice we got the both of them have a bubble design on the roof actually, which is kind of funny. The Supra seems a little bit more prominent though, with their double bubble design. And then taillights, love the taillights on the new Supra. I think that's a cool feature. And then you guys can see you've got all the badges, right? Like GR badge and all that. And what you'll also notice here is you've got the reverse light, which looks like a fog light, rain light, which is cool. And then more normal looking exhaust tips. They're still very large and prominent, but they don't have like that cool design on the inside like the Z exhaust tips do. But you get some nice sounds out of the Supra exhaust, we can say that. And then notice how it almost looks like a ducktail on the back, and because of how it's shaped, which is kind of interesting. And look at this, we got a little button to open up the hatch on the key fob. And it's a hatch just like the Z. Now, you notice that the opening actually isn't as large as the Z, but it seems like the loading floor is a little bit lower in the Supra compared to the Z. But it's like, it's a catch-22 because you guys can see the sound system that's in the way. So like it's more practical in some ways, but then less practical in other ways. And so they're both, two-door, two-seater sports cars, so they're both impractical, but I'm sure people will make the storage space in the back work that buy these cars. Now going over the door panel on the front, so a lot of the material use isn't necessarily like the nicest in the Z, but the door panel, like on the bottom portion right there, you can see with the leather and the Alcantara, very nice. Like it looks amazing, and you'll see a lot of switchgear out of other Nissan models throughout, right? And that's just typical with a manufacturer when they build a sports car like this. And then you guys can see here with the sticker, so you can see the weight of the car itself. Basically, you just take the gross vehicle weight rating and then minus the payload if you want the weight of the car. And then here are the seats. Love these two-tone seats. Love the design of the seats. This is something where I will just openly say the Z just flat out wins compared to the Supra. The seats are more comfortable. They look better, especially in the two-tone design. And they hold you in place better. Like they are better in every single aspect. And they're still power adjustable too. So yeah, like I said, I think that one's pretty easy. Pedals look amazing too, even the dead pedal. And you guys can see there with the stability control. And then you got the nice paddle shifters. That's another thing where the Z wins, is the paddle shifters are nicer in the automatic. So take that for what it is. Now the Supra, you guys can see here with just showing the keyless entry system on the car, which I remember glitched out a bunch when I owned that car. There's a lot of electronic things. I mean, it is a BMW at the end of the day. Now notice the door panel just doesn't, like, the material use is nice, you know, because it's got a BMW interior, but it's just not that nice. I think that they could have done more with like the coloration on it. And I mean, you guys saw what Nissan did. You know, they basically used not the most expensive materials, and they made those, you know, not so expensive materials just look nice. And then look at the seats too. Like the bolstering's decent on them, but yeah, these seats just, they aren't as cool looking as the Z seats, and they aren't as quite as comfortable. And so I think that, you know, Toyota should just, like the seats in the new GR86, for example, they should just take those seats and put them in the Supra. And yeah, pedals look pretty good too. But that's my opinion. You don't have a nice dead pedal like you have in the Nissan, just saying. But let me know what you guys think on the seat thing. I think that's what they should do, is like, I'd rather have the seats from like the GR86 and the Supra than the BMW seats. And then you guys can see there with the little stop start button. Got our full digital gauge cluster. Love the animation with the Z. Look at that. Pretty cool. Now here's the steering wheel. So you guys can see here with the materials, the steering wheel is actually a very nice thing to look at. So they did go a little bit more all out with the steering wheel from a design and material standpoint, I think. Now it's not the most expensive materials, but just like the finishes on the materials make it look more upscale, make it look more expensive. They really minimized the amount of like, you know, just like scratchy looking plastic on the steering wheel, which I really appreciate. And, you know, it worked. Now, as for the gauge cluster, Nissan's going digital with all their gauge clusters. This was something that I thought was funny too, is with the fuel economy on the car. I'm not sure why it was, because apparently the Z is supposed to be able to get, you know, around town at least like high teens. So maybe we were driving it too hard or something. But you guys can see here with the screen, you can see different bits of information. Now with the drive mode select, you can see popping in the sport mode. This is one thing that Nissan could have potentially, you know, done a little bit more with, is, you know, just as sport, right? Doesn't do a whole like gauge cluster change. A lot of car makers do that nowadays. Love the analog gauges here at the top though. I think this is a really cool thing that they did. And then as for the infotainment system, pretty straightforward. You got a backup camera, right? And resolution is pretty good. Trajectory lines for the steering wheel. It's not a big car, so like you don't need a lot from a camera perspective. And then as for the rest of the infotainment system, I've reviewed several Nissans and lived with several Nissans on a week-to-week period. And I can tell you that the infotainment system's easy to use. It's like, I'm a pretty simple person, so like I just hook up my Bluetooth, listen to my music, and there you go. Like, and it's got navigation and all that kind of stuff, but I know where I'm going most of the time, so I don't even use navigation. It's like whatever. And so yeah, I think that response time's great and it's easy to use. It's not the most modern looking per se, but gets the job done. Single zone climate, so you can see there with some USBs below that, and then you've got the little space there for a phone. Stop start, and then you get your drive mode or D mode selector, and then you can see the automatic shifter. This is something that's going to be interesting. I mean, it's something that you only like touch once when you, right? Oh, maybe when you reverse, you're going to touch it multiple times, but like you're really just going to put it into drive, and it's easy to use enough. Now here's the manual transmission, so you can see the difference with them. Shift point's really notchy. That's just popping it into reverse. But yeah, definitely love the feel of the shifter. It's super notchy. It's not technically like a short throw shifter, but the throws are not super long either. So I think they did a solid job with that. And then you guys can see heated seats here at the front, and then the opening there for the trunk area. And then you got one cup holder. You got a traditional brake, so you can do your drifting here. And these I'm sure we're going to see a ton of that out of California especially. And then notice another cup holder there in the center console, which is kind of funny. And then again, I love the two-tone interior. It just makes it feel a little bit more special. And they use, like, because the Supra has an interior that's red, but they don't use nearly as much red in the interior. Like this, it pops, like it really does. So even though material use is pretty much the same, right, in terms of like the quality of materials, it pops a little bit more in the Z. And then you guys can see there with the double bubble design at the top, which is another cool feature. And, you know, just again gives it kind of like a cool aesthetic. And then you guys can see here popping over to the Supra. Got a cool digital gauge cluster as well. Now here is the steering wheel. So this is why I wanted to emphasize in the Z. Like, look at, you know, like they both use plastic on the steering wheel, but look how much cheaper the Supra steering wheel looks because they've just done the regular black, you know, not gloss. They've just done the black plastic, and so it doesn't look as like upscale as what you have in the Z. Paddle shifters, it's funny, the faces look nice, but the back is just straight plastic. And I don't know why BMW does that. You know, obviously this is just a BMW, you know, paddle shifter. And so I don't understand. I sincerely do not understand. They should just have it nice on both sides, frankly. I'm sure it's a wear and tear thing, but whatever. I'd rather have a nice looking paddle shifter. And then you guys can see here with the digital gauge cluster, really cool aesthetic. I definitely love what they've done from a gauge cluster perspective. You do have some elements, again, from BMW, but it just looks really good. It definitely has that performance car feel, especially since the, you know, tachometer is just right there in the center, right? It's the first thing you see. It's like super aggressive. And then notice it gets a little bit red in sport. Again, this suffers from the same thing the Z suffers from, where it doesn't change all that much. When you go into sport mode, it changes a little bit, but it's not like a crazy change with the gauge cluster. I think that both manufacturers could definitely improve that, do some sort of cool animation into the sport mode. And then here's the infotainment system. It's not BMW's newest infotainment system. It's their older unit. Response time's great. It's easy to use. And aside from that, I mean, there's not much else to it. You can see the camera system resolution's great. Got parking sensors front and rear, which definitely help out. Something I want to mention is you guys saw the fuel economy there. So when I was in the manual Z, it had higher fuel economy. My guess is that both the cars are going to get about the same from a fuel economy perspective. There might be a slight difference, but I'm guessing that they're both going to be the same. And you guys can see, remember when I had the Gen 2 Raptor that was orange? There you go in the camera view with the car. But yeah, I remember I averaged like high teens, but I was having fun with the car. I was using it for what it's meant to be used for, frankly. And so yeah, definitely understand that. And then notice you can like hover over the buttons and it'll do the presets. Again, more BMW technology. So there is some cool stuff in this because they're basically using the platform of a luxury manufacturer. So definitely, I guess, take that into account, and I guess that'll be more important in a little bit when we talk about the driving. But down below we have dual zone climate. We've got heated seats for the front, so that is something the Supra has over the Z, is it has dual zone, whereas the Z only has a single zone climate. One thing to say though is they're small cars, so it's like, do you really need dual zone? But again, also, you know, if you have a significant other, then yeah, maybe you do. Depends on how grouchy they get with the climate system. Aside from that, the other weird thing about the climate system is just how you direct the airflow. Then you guys can see the wireless phone charger. So this actually has a wireless phone charger. The Z does not. But the wireless phone charger in the Supra is almost unusable because your phone slides all over the place. It is. I remember that was frustrating. And then here's a shifter. I will say that since this is kind of more of like, even though it's a BMW shifter, it's more like a traditional type shifter. I do prefer this over the automatic shifter that is in the Z. But then here's the manual you can get in the Supra. Obviously, haven't driven it. I'm wondering if it's going to be like the manual in a BMW or the manual in a, you know, Toyota Corolla in terms of like the shifter feel. I don't know, right? We don't know yet. But I'm sure it'll feel great. I'm hoping. We can only hope, right? But I can guarantee that the Z shifter feels great. So, and then I love how you have a big sport button, right? And then also the carbon fiber. That's something that the Z did miss out on, is they didn't use a bunch of carbon fiber throughout the interior. I think that does kind of make the Supra feel a little bit more special from that perspective. Again, lots of plastic buttons all over instead of like cool toggle switches and everything like what you have with the Z. It seems like they, you know, took a lot of the, you know, materials in the Supra that weren't exactly nice, and they're like, okay, let's make sure that those things are nicer in the Z so that, you know, the touch points that people are going to be touching on a regular basis, you know, just feel and look a little bit more upscale, basically. And then you don't have a center console, and this is back when you had to have a mask everywhere, I remember. But yeah, it's just some cup holders. So the Z is more practical in that sense, that it has like a real center console that you can close with the lid. That was another thing I remember with the Supra. I was like, man, because I always had to have my wallet like just exposed, and I'm like, what if someone just sees it and then breaks into the car? Just thoughts there. But it does have a glove box, so you can use that for quite a few things with the Supra. And then you guys can see here with the vents. I do like that design cue on it. And there's nice stitching on the dash too. And then again, that double bubble design there at the roof with the Supra. And so yeah, let's get into, this is a little bit of a long video, but let's get into summing things up with this comparison and talk about the driving dynamics with both cars. So from an exterior aesthetics perspective, here's the deal. When you look at things up close on the Z, everything looks nice. When you look at it from a distance, it looks nice. The Supra is kind of a little bit different. So like when you look at things up close, it's kind of like jumbled and all over the place and it looks funny. But when you put everything together and you look at the whole car, it actually looks really good. So just don't look up at things up close. And then from an interior perspective, you've got, pluses and minuses to both of the vehicles. I think the seats in the Z are a little bit nicer. I think that gauge cluster, it's 6s. I do like the center tachometer in the Supra. Infotainment system, again, that's also 6s. There's some cool BMW gadgets though in the Supra, so that is something that needs to be mentioned. And then, they both have sport modes, so that's what's important with the cars. And then you can get either automatics or manuals with both of them. Now, a lot of people are going to be wondering, is the automatic in the Z as responsive as the automatic in the Supra? And here's what I got from, driving the Z and, being someone who owned the Supra. Is the Z, it seems like that transmission's tuned more towards like a luxury side because it's like really smooth with the shifts and it is quick to shift. The Supra, on the other hand, it can be, kind of a little bit abrasive with that 8-speed automatic transmission. So it seems like it's less towards the luxury side, unless you have it in normal mode. I'm talking about sport mode to sport mode, by the way. And so I would say the Supra feels like it does shift faster. It feels a little bit more aggressive. The Z, it's quick to shift, but it's not as aggressive. And so the Supra is definitely more of an experience from that perspective. Now, I can't comment on the manual Supra because I haven't driven one yet because it's not even out yet. But I can tell you I've driven a manual Corolla and I've driven a manual BMW. And so I think that the manual transmissions, based on whatever one they use, I think it's going to be a good transmission. The manual in the Z is amazing. It's super notchy. It's super fun. Now, acceleration, this is where things are very interesting with both of the cars. So first off, from a sound perspective, the Supra, you get the pops and the bangs, and so some of you guys might like that and some of you might not. The Z kind of has more of just like a clean V6 sound. So like if you're used to like the 370Z sound, or it almost sounds like a GTR too in some cases, that's kind of what you're getting. So it's not crazy loud out there. It's not pops and bangs. It's just like this, louder V6 sound, basically. Again, like I said with the Supra, it's inline 6. It sounds like a BMW. So if you've driven a BMW, you've driven a Supra from a sound perspective. And then with the speed, here's the deal. So the Z is really good at hooking up. Like there is no drama. When you like punch it from a standstill, there's a little bit of spin, but it just pretty much hooks up and goes. And it almost feels all-wheel drive. It has this like all-wheel drive planted feel, and the suspension is really like good at damping. And so again, it kind of gives you that nice planted feel throughout. On the other hand, with the Supra, it's violent when you launch it. Like it spins and, pretty much does like a half burnout. It almost feels more like a muscle car, from when you just like punch it and go. And something that I noticed with the Supra is it feels way more rear wheel drive. Like it is super tail happy. It's Supra tail happy. Haha. It's super tail happy, and it's, just wants to step out all the time. And you definitely have to be careful with the throttle modulation. And, driving both of them, I would say that the Supra feels, even though it's down in horsepower, it feels quicker once you hook up. But that's the thing, is I think that when people actually race these back to back, I think off the line the Z is going to win. But then once we're up and moving, I think the Supra, because it's still like underrated from a power perspective, would probably win. And it's lighter weight compared to the Z as well. That's another thing, is it does weigh less. But one thing I don't like about the Supra from a driving dynamic perspective is the front end feels so light when you're kind of going around corners and stuff. Even though it has a 50-50 weight distribution, sometimes it just feels like you run out of front end grip, which is weird because it's a front engine car. And I don't like that. It almost feels like the front end's going to like just pop off the ground. You don't get that with the Z. So like I said, the Z feels planted. The Z almost feels like an all-wheel drive car. The Supra, on the other hand, feels like a rear-wheel drive car and, doesn't necessarily feel as planted. Around town and all that, they're just as smooth and comfortable as each other. So you're not really giving up anything from a luxury perspective with either car. And so, yeah, it's definitely a tough comparison. And then obviously pricing, the Supra is more expensive than the Z. The Z loaded up is like 53 grand. The Supra loaded up is like $57,000, $58,000. So the Supra is a little bit more money. So that is something else to consider if you are comparing both of these cars to each other. And so, yeah, like I said, it's definitely a tough choice overall. It's hard for me to pick a winner because it's just depends on, the driving dynamics you like more. If you want to drive more on the edge, right, you feel like you're, really having to kind of like wrestle the car a little bit, then the Supra. But if you want something that, feels like you are in control, and it's kind of hard to get the Z to step out. You can get it to step out, but it's a lot harder than, right, Nissan Z. So hopefully that helped you guys out. Let me know which one you would pick, and there you go.